Okay, now let's add this animation word into this scene. Basically, we can just select this text tool and draw a shape like this. With this shape, we are showing to the software where we want to write. And let's type word animation. Let's select the selection tool. And here in character panel, if you cannot see this character panel, you can go to window and enable it from here, character. Let's change this to a bigger font. And by the way, I've used Nexa Rust script font, which is free, and you'll be able to download it by the link which I've added to description to this class. I feel like this is pretty nice font, which goes nice with this design. So let's select this animation, change to Nexa Rust script or any font which you like. Let's set paragraph to center and let's align it in the center of our screen. Okay, now we have our animation word. So how we can create this right on kind of effect? Basically, we will use a stroke effect for it. But before, we want to show our software how to write this word. This is a manual process, but it really gives you full control on how you can write any text which you have on the screen, which is really cool. So let's select our animation and then select this pen tool. Then with wheel on the mouse, you can scroll in to see it better. And by pressing and holding spacebar, you can change your cursor to this hand cursor, which allows you to move around on your image by left mouse clicking and dragging. But don't forget to hold spacebar. In this way, you will be able to navigate your window. Okay, so let's start creating this right on effect. I'm gonna start here by clicking here. And basically, by clicking and dragging, I'm creating this outline of the text. And your goal is to create this line exactly in the center of each letter. In this way, this effect will look great. I'm gonna press M on keyboard to change the mask to the color which would be easier to see. So you would be able to see how I'm drawing this mask and try to repeat exactly the same on your word which you are going to use. Make sure that my line covers every part of this word, even this dot here, because this effect will basically fill everything on which I've drawn this line. So I'm gonna speed up this process to not waste any time. And by the way, in these parts where you want to go back, just create a dot like here, click and hold and drag, and you can also press spacebar and move this keyframe like this, which is really handy to be able to go back inside of your letter. Okay, so I've traced my letters, and now we can apply effect stroke. Let's go to effects and presets here, and let's type it stroke. If you cannot see this panel, go to window, effects and presets to enable this panel, or go to generate stroke, which basically select your animation and go to effects, generate stroke. So now we can select our stroke and we want to adjust brush size. As you can see, by changing this brush size, we are covering our letters. And our goal is to cover completely our letters, because this brush stroke will reveal our letters. And if we will not cover all the letters, it will cut out some parts of it. So in my case, I want to use something like 12. And then if I'm gonna change this paint style to reveal original image, you can see it looks like nothing changes. But if I'm gonna change this brush stroke to smaller number, you can see that this brush effect is covering our letters, which is exactly what we want. And in my case, 12 works fine. Basically, you want to keep this value small, so don't go overboard because it will not help with the animation. Also, we want to set brush hardness to 100%. And with this start and end, it basically works like trim path, which we already used. So once again, we want to animate our end as we did with the shape layers. So let's create a keyframe, then select your animation and press U to see this keyframe. Move it to the start, and if you will hold shift, it will snap to the start. And a lot later, just before this ball drop, set this end to 100%, which basically will write all the letters. And here's why you don't want to change it to really big values. So for example, if I'm gonna set to really big value like 100, you'll see that it basically covers like something brushes over like this. And it doesn't look really complex as you would want. This is why we want to set to 12, because in this way we can see how it writes each line of the letters, and it looks much more professional. As always, we want to select one of the keyframes and go to the graph editor and create this kind of shape, which will represent this slower movement at the start, then fast write-it-on effect, and slower movement at the end. So we would see like it's drawing the last letter, which looks really cool. At this point, we can press 0 on numpad to see how it looks. It looks pretty cool, but now we want to add another animation for start. So let's click here on this stopwatch to create a new keyframe. And about here where ball drops, we want to set to 100%, so this animation will disappear before this ball drops. So now let's press U on keyboard to see this animation of start. And by changing this keyframe position, we need to make sure to see how it disappearing just before this ball drops. And now we can just select these both keyframes and press F9, so it would also have this kind of animation. So if I'm gonna press 0 on numpad, we can see this cool effect. And now we can just simply change the animation color, the color of our character. So let's go to characters, and first color which I want to use, we can just click here, and with this eyedropper we can just select this color of ball, which is really bright and looks pretty cool. So let's click OK. And now what we can do is press U on keyboard and cut to this moment, so it would be easier to see where this animation ends. And we can just simply duplicate this word. So let's press Ctrl D to duplicate it. And by moving this top layer few frames like this to the right, we can make it this second one start a bit later. And also we can change the colors of it. So let's click here, and with this eyedropper, let's change it to this color which we have on our ball, and click OK. So now as you can see, we already have two colors, which looks much more professional and cool. And finally, we can do this one more time, but before, I want to make sure that this animation at the end also has a bit of colors. So to introduce more colors, I can select this second one and press U on keyboard and move this last keyframe to the left. In this way, as you can see, we already introducing more colors at the end also, which looks a lot more interesting. And now we can select this animation too and press Ctrl D and move it a bit later, few frames, just like we did before, and change this color maybe to this ring color and click OK. Or maybe let's make this color more bluish. So now as you can see, this is how you basically can create this really cool and professional looking animation. In the next video, I'm going to show you how you can create this kind of 3D looking effect of these squares as a little introduction to the 3D world of Adobe After Effects. And you'll be surprised how easy and how fast you can do it. See you in the next video. Okay, so now we are going to add this kind of more 3D kind of look. This is pretty easy to do, and before we are going to add those kind of frames, which you could see in the preview, these ones. We want to add a bit of animation to circle itself. It will kind of give a little spoiler that something about to happen. Basically, we will add this kind of pulse at the start, and then we will add these kind of frames. And this is really good idea to have something that kind of teases us that something about to happen. Because if we would not have this kind of animation at the start, these frames will not have the same interesting impact in animation. So let's create this kind of impact at the start. So it's pretty easy to do. Here where it stops, we want to select this circle because it controls the texture itself also. And we want to press S on keyboard because now we are going to animate our scale. This is why it's really important that we've used our anchor point at the center, because if this anchor point would set here, this circle would not become bigger from the center, but it will become bigger from the side, which not what we want. So always make sure that your anchor point is set to the right place. So now we can just create a keyframe here where it stops. A bit later, we can make it bigger, and here to 100% as it was. So now we already have this kind of pulse. And if I'm gonna cut this work area to this moment and press 0 numpad, we can see this pulse. We want to add a bit more character to our animation. And as you remember, it's always a good idea to finish your animation with the last keyframe in graph editor. It's always a good idea to end with this animation. It already will give this kind of pulse. And to make sure that we don't have any squares in our animations, we can just select this animation and press F9. And now as you can see, we already have these kind of nice shapes, which we always want to have if we want to have smooth animation. Okay, great. Now we've added this kind of scaling up. And to sell this effect even more, we can make this glow part to be a lot brighter. So let's open this circle. And here in contents, we can see our glow. Let's open glow and let's go to the fill and let's go to the transform, because here we set our opacity to 7%. And if you've set your opacity in fill to 7%, make sure that you set your fill to 100%. And here in transform, let's animate this property. You can animate either way, or in transform or the fill. But in my case, I've changed it in transform. So I'm gonna animate it in transform. So here I've created a keyframe. I'll move it over where it has original size. And here where it's about to be bigger, I want to increase this opacity to maybe 35%. You can set it even higher, but don't go overboard because it would look too much. So maybe 42 is maximum for me. And when it goes smaller, I want to set it to original value, which was 7. So about here, I'm gonna set it to 7. Once again, we can select this keyframe, go to graph editor, and give this kind of animation. And now we just want to move these keyframes a bit, so this glow will happen at the point where it's a lot bigger, like this. If I'm gonna press 0 numpad, we can see this kind of pulse, which looks really cool. And we can even add one more detail to make it a bit more interesting. Because as you can see here in this pulse, I've added this circle, which gives even more complexity and looks even more interesting. So let's move our time cursor to the point where it's a lot bigger. We can select this ellipse tool, just left click and hold, and select this ellipse tool. Make sure that you didn't select anything, and from center, click and drag, hold Ctrl, so it will create from the center, and hold Shift, so it would be a perfect circle, and make it a bit bigger than this original circle, and release it. So now as you can see, it's not in center. This is why we can select this new shape layer which we created, and click here on Align to center it as well. Now we can change this color to any color which we want. In our case, we can even click on this stroke and change it to solid color, and click OK. And now we can change to one color which we like. In my case, I've used the same color as this, but you can change to any color which you like. Let's change the stroke to a bit bigger value like this, and let's maybe call it flash, because it will be a little flash of light. Then let's select this selection tool and move it so it will appear at this moment, and here it will disappear. So to animate this, we can just press T on keyboard to see our opacity, and here at the beginning we can set to 0, create a keyframe, then move it a few frames, set it to 100, and here later let's set it to 0. We can just select all of these keyframes and press F9. By the way, a quick tip on opacity: you don't really need to go to the graph editor, because it's not that much visible as in different kind of properties. So here you can just select your keyframes and press F9, which will give basic smooth animation, and it still looks pretty cool. But let's maybe spread this last keyframe and this as well, And maybe let's not set to 100%, but a bit smaller value like 69. And if you want, you can change this color to any color which you want. Maybe this orange color would work better. It's completely up to you. And let's maybe cut this layer so we would know where this layer finishes. It's about here. We can hold Alt key and press on square bracket to cut this layer to this moment.